It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
So welcome to the program. Very special guest. We have author Mr. Dan Wass is with us. He is the author of this book that he sent me, Good Gun, Bad Guy, Behind the Lies of the Anti-Gun Radical. Dan, welcome to the program, sir.
Hey, Paul, thanks so much for having me on your show. You're doing a fantastic job, and I also wanted to just thank you for your great support of Jan Morgan. Hopefully Arkansas can get her into the governor's seat.
Well, you know, I'm really pleased that you're following that race, because I mean it really is fascinating, the lack of conservatism that we have when compared to the platform and what the people have been voting on. So it's really good that you're watching that. Where are you calling in from right now? Where do you live, Dan?
I live in a city called Saratoga Springs, New York. We're in kind of upstate New York.
Nice.
I happen to be friends with Jan Morgan, and I know personally she is probably the best thing for Arkansas. She's fantastic, and she's a real true patriot. But yeah, I'm from New York. And I like to get down there. When I come down to Arkansas, Alabama, some of the southern states, I always feel welcome down there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're welcome. You're welcome in Arkansas anytime, and I'd love to have you in the studio, and we can do a whole show together. That'd be fun sometime. So
absolutely.
So this book, and I understand you got another one, Good Gun, Bad Guy 2, Destroying the Anti-Gun Narrative. So I've read parts of your book here, in preparing for this interview, and I have to say, Dan, it really is interesting that you've taken the approach of, okay, let's try to understand why the left, doesn't like the concept of guns. And one of the things that you talk about really is just fear, that they just don't understand and that they're afraid. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, when we talk about fear of guns, the big thing that the anti-gun radicals are doing is they're using fear to manipulate people, to basically to stay scared of guns. Because when people are scared of guns, they don't go to the range. They don't learn. They don't want to get knowledge. Because what happens when you get knowledge on something that you're scared of? The fear goes away. They don't want that. So they'll keep people scared to death of guns. But another thing that they're doing is they like to make those same people angry and hateful toward gun owners. Now, gun owners are the most responsible and respectable people that I've ever met in my life, and it's troubling to see how gun owners get tarnished by the anti-gun left in a way that just really creates a hatred. It's none of it's true. It's all propaganda from the anti-gunners, but the fear and the hate together create a perfect recipe to indoctrinate and create more anti-gunners.
I completely agree with that. I think that is, you're going to fear. I guess we don't see guns as tools anymore. I guess if you go back to the 18th century and beyond we used to see them more often. We would interact with them. They were tools. They weren't what the left basically wants us to think, that they're sentient beings now. They're just floating around ready to kill somebody.
Yeah. They want you to think that the gun is the cause of the violence. That's why they. And here's the thing, Paul. This is at the core of their anti-gun fear campaign. It's a term called gun violence. Everybody's heard it. The reason it doesn't make any sense is because it doesn't exist. There's no such thing as gun violence. There is, however, human violence. But they don't want to look at that, because that most often reflects on failed, liberal policies. We could talk about that, but we'd have to talk about, poor, lack of immigration patrol. We'd have to talk about drugs. We'd have to talk about inner city crime and poverty and all these things that they don't want to focus on. So what they do is they try to take that term violence and the word gun, and they put them together to make people think of guns and violence as synonyms.
One of the things that I thought was really good, we're talking with Dan Wass, the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy. Matter of fact, we got the website up right now at facebook.com/Conduit News. You guys can go there who are listening. It's just goodgunbadguy.net. That's goodgunbadguy.net. goodgunbadguy.net. One of the things I thought was fascinating is that you, in your book, you talk about how you grew up around guns, but the anti-gun left in the media and the narrative eventually convinced you as a younger man that guns were actually bad. And then you kind of had an awakening. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And the thing that I call it my saving grace was that I did have experience when I was a kid. I knew how to shoot guns and how to handle them properly because my dad taught me when I was a kid. We went hunting and target shooting and things. But he died when I was 24, and I went on. I was playing in rock bands most of my life, and I was kind of hanging with the wrong crowd, so to speak. I was hanging with people who, they weren't bad people, but they were more anti-gun, liberal type people. And what happens is when you're in an environment like that, you start to take on the beliefs and the thought process of the environment that you're in. This is just human nature. And I started to create and develop almost a hatred toward guns until I started to, there's a point when you have to let logic take over, and then you can't lie to yourself anymore. And I started to do that. I started to realize that, what the heck am I thinking here? This is just crazy. And then I had a situation in my own life where a gun may have come in handy. Thankfully it didn't. But I tell the story in the book. But it was an awareness. It was a moment of clarity, an aha moment type of thing. And I said, geez, I'm really on the wrong side of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is just bad. So that's how it kind of turned around. So I've been on both sides of this conversation, and I can tell you, on the left, on the anti-gun side of the conversation, it is nothing but lies, rhetoric, propaganda, and nonsense, skewed statistics, and all sorts of stuff. But because I've seen it from both perspectives.
The left wants to take away our guns, right? I mean, that's their long game, right? They really want to confiscate all weapons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the goal. They want to restrict gun owners of their Second Amendment right, because for a couple reasons that I've come to learn is that, first of all, it's fear among the anti-gunners, but it's a sense of control from the anti-second radicals. And when I decipher the difference in the book between anti-second radicals and anti-gunners, the anti-gunners are the victims in this whole thing because they fall prey to the propaganda. But they really do want to, they want a gun-free America. And it's the most destructive thing that you could do, is exactly what they're doing. This is what causes violence. This is gun-free zones, for instance. I was just kind of going on some of the anti-gun websites and seeing what they're talking about these days. And you go to Crazy Town and Demanding Moms and all these anti-gun sites. And what they're trying to do right now is scare people by saying that they need these bulletproof backpacks for the children in schools because of all these crazy shootings. It's a problem that they created with gun-free zones, and they perpetrate the fear and they perpetrate the problem by keeping these places gun-free, because what happens is you invite maniacs when they know that there's no armed opposition. In other words, you can't, if you're a teacher, you can't have a concealed carry, and they even keep armed guards away from the school. They don't want any guns there. So what happens is the crazies go there. 69% of the time, killers will choose gun-free zones over places that...
Yes.
So what they're doing is they're creating a problem, and they're festering it and making it worse, and they're using it to scare people.
Can you mentioned Mom's Demand, Mom's Demand Action. What can you tell us about that group? Because it's kind of like they've taken the, from an anti-gun stance, they're like, okay, we got real, with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, you put moms in front of it. I feel like that was their tactic. They're like, oh, we'll be more effective if we remind everybody that we're moms.
Yeah, well, yeah, good point. I call them the demanding moms. But I think they're just another one of those groups that people will latch on to these people who are already scared of guns will go to these groups for reassurance. Here's the thing. People have beliefs about guns, that guns are scary and guns are dangerous and all this stuff. And they want support groups that don't tell them necessarily the truth, but that reinforce their current beliefs. So these groups are perfect for people who already hate guns to go and kind of gather with and soak up the propaganda and the rhetoric and feel good about themselves, because once they have that reassurance from groups like Demanding Moms and Crazy Town, they feel better about themselves, almost like their thoughts and their beliefs are true because they have backup reinforcement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. There's strength in numbers. When you're in a group, people feel more confident in their opinions. I mean, right now I'm looking at a photo, Dan. I don't know if you follow this. I know you're following Jan Morgan and you're friends with her and you support her run for governor. But back during the last session last year, they were trying to pass a Second Amendment, bill that really just was more restrictions to our rights. And Asa met with Mom's Demand and had a nice little photo op with them, and we've got that photo right now up on the screen. And it's just very, very frustrating, because you're just thinking, what if you're really pro Second Amendment? Like, why would you meet with this group that is anti-Second Amendment? I mean, completely anti-Second Amendment, even though they claim that they're not. They claim that they're just for reasonable. That phrase is always troublesome. Just we want reasonable gun control. Oh yeah, well, exactly. Well, first of all, let me just address that reasonable gun control one. Here's the problem with this is, people are being trained to not see and understand the difference between a right and a privilege. And Jan and I talk about this all the time. There's a distinct difference. A privilege is something that's given by man, can be taken away by man. It's often used as leverage. You tell your kid, well, you didn't eat your dinner, now you lose the privilege of staying up past 9 o'clock. A privilege can be taken away. A right cannot be taken away. A right is inherent and God-given, if you will. So what's happening is people are being trained in our society to blur the two. So this is why you can have exactly what you're talking about. This is why you can have someone say, well, I support, the Second Amendment, but I think we need common sense gun restrictions. Well, you can't do both. You can't support my right to keep and bear while restricting my right to keep and bear. It doesn't make sense. But they think this is okay because they see rights as privileges. Well, and I'm really interested. It's great that you said that, Dan, because that's exactly what Governor Asa Hutchinson calls our Second Amendment multiple times, even though with public, I don't know what his advisors are telling him. But the guy constantly talks about our Second Amendment privilege. And, and Jan actually has a whole story where she says, you can't say that. And he says rights, privileges, same thing, according to her. Well, they're not the same thing. They're really very different.
They're very different. Jan and I have had this conversation many times. Jan wrote the foreword to my book, and we talk about this. This is probably the biggest, most important piece here that people need to understand. And there's actually a photo of Jan and me with the it's not a privilege, it's my right. And it's a pretty cool photo. We're both holding guns and stuff. But it's so true because they're starting to really blur the definitions, and it's dangerous.
Yeah, it really, really, truly is. Well, Dan Wass, I appreciate you coming on. It's great to meet you. I'd love to have you on again soon. Your book, by the way,
anytime.
is Good Gun, Bad Guy. And the website, once again, is, hang on one second, I just had it in front of me, goodgunbadguy.net. And you also have a second book that's out that is a second edition. And so I'm just really, really interested in this. And I love what you're doing. Thank you for standing up for the Second Amendment. And we'll do this again soon.
Oh, thanks so much, Paul. Look forward to it.
Yes, sir. Dan Wass, everybody. Go check out that book if you haven't. That's a excellent interview, just full of knowledge. And really loved that he picked up on this whole right versus privilege thing. That's an important component. I mean, you've got to listen to the words your politicians are using. Words matter. And in this case, Asa has repeatedly, and we'll pull the audio, he's repeatedly said, that this is your Second Amendment privilege. And it's really frustrating. And he does that. In the context of restricting your gun rights, he's using the proper terminology. When he's creating more tape and more permission slips in order to exercise your Second Amendment right, he's actually turning it into a privilege by regulating it. But that's not what the Constitution says. It's not what the Arkansas Constitution says. We got